السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم، أما بعد. One very important verse, considering that we are in the month of Ramadan and the final 10 days, the last 10 days of the month of Ramadan. Allah Azza wa Jal, He speaks about this month and the importance or the significance of this month to such an extent, if one adheres to the commands of Allah Azza wa Jal in this month as it has been revealed, then Allah Azza wa Jal promised that the reward for it will come directly from Him, and nothing in this world can be compared or equal to that reward. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah says, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. This is the month wherein the Quran was revealed. هدى للناس. It's a guidance for mankind. وبينات من الهدى. It's a guidance, it's a wording, and it's a furqan, it's a criteria in which Allah Azza wa Jal has set, Allah Azza wa Jal has legislated for the believer. One of the important thing about the Quran, or many different things about the Quran that is important, is that the Quran itself is a miracle. And the Quran is relevant throughout time. From the time it was once revealed to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And often we hear from many different people from all different walks of life that what makes the Muslims say that the Quran remains relevant today. Because Allah Azza wa Jal has stated in the Quran that it is we, meaning that it is Allah Azza wa Jal who has revealed the Quran, and it is I, meaning Allah Azza wa Jal, who will preserve it. Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikr wa inna lahu lahafidhun. Certainly we have revealed this remembrance, and we shall be the one who will protect it. So it doesn't need any external defense in terms of defending Islam. And just briefly speak on, as we know, there are people who are not in favor of the Quran, and they have some sort of agenda, and as a result of that, they have days where they celebrate burning the Quran. But even as a believer, as a Muslim, this is not our sunnah to retaliate, or our sunnah to challenge this in any form or fashion, because Allah says, "Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikr wa inna lahu lahafidhun." It is we who revealed the Quran, and it is we who are protected. The Quran is a miracle in that sense. It doesn't need protection. That's number one. Number two, the Quran does not have an expiration date. It doesn't expire. Though there are certain parts of the Quran that was revealed for a specific time. But even though those verses was revealed for a specific time, the example of that event historically is still relevant today. If something similar occur, then we would apply the same ruling or the same understanding. As we know, the Quran was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in 610. And we know that before the event of the Quran, we had what we called the Gospel, which is today some would call it the Bible. But as Muslims, there's a difference between the Gospel and the Bible, and that's, inshallah, we can get into that later on. And 600 years before the Quran, we had the gospel, which was given to Bani Israel, the children of the children uh, uh, um, of Bani Israel, the children of Israel. And we know that before that, the scripture, which was the Torah, or commonly known as the Tanakh, was given to our prophet Musa alayhi salatu wassalam. And prior to that, we have the Zabur, the Psalms that was given to Prophet Dawood alayhi salatu wassalam. But why is it that the Quran, or the belief as a Muslim in terms of the Quran, is different? Why do we hold the Quran to a higher standard over these scriptures, though they were also revealed by Allah Azza wa Jal? And commonly often we hear that why Muslims, why do we subscribe to the Quran and we don't subscribe to other books? One of the many reasons is that Allah Azza wa Jal never stated in any other book prior to the Quran that I would preserve it and we would protect this book from errors and mistakes and from the hands of men who had wicked agendas. And this is by the wisdom of Allah Azza wa Jal for allowing these books to fall into the hands of those whom changed the books. And Allah mentions in the Quran, فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَكْتُبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ, woe to those who have changed the books with their hands. And we know Prophet Isa alayhi salam, he came and he warned the people about changing the scriptures that was given to prophets before him. So we understand how significant that it is in terms of preservation of that book. But we know events have changed, things has changed, and those isolated time, or the isolated places in time. And as a result of that, by the mercy and by the wisdom of Allah Azza wa Jal, He also allowed certain things to be, forgotten. But Allah Azza wa Jal did not allow for the people to replace that which was forgotten with their own ideas or their own understanding. And because of that, Allah speaks about the changes that they've made in the Quran. And these are one of the reasons that Allah also referred to the Quran as Al-Furqan. It was a criteria. And some would say that, how can I follow the Quran, or how is the Quran relevant to me? Wherein you can see other scriptures prior to the Quran, like the Bible, the Torah. We see these scriptures were changed. How do we know that the Quran is unchanged? How can we have that confidence in the Quran? One of the many miracles, and one of the best miracles of the Quran, was how the Quran was preserved. It was preserved through an oral tradition way before it was written down by scribes. To the extent where as it was revealed, we also know in the month of Ramadan, Angel Jibreel alayhi salam will come to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he would review the Quran with the Prophet. So this was also a common norm amongst the Prophet, between the Prophet and Jibreel alayhi salam, as instructed by Allah Azza wa Jal. We also know that when the Quran was revealed, many companions memorized it. We had many, Ubay bin Ka'b, Zayd bin Thabit, Abu Bakr Siddiq, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and all of these scribes were there. And over 34 in some narrations, some say 43. These were original scribes at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they memorized the Quran. Not only did they memorize the Quran, but some of the literate, those who were literate amongst them, they began writing these verses down for a secondary form of preservation. But the Quran was revealed in such a way that it was easy to memorize. And in Surah Al-Qamar, Allah speaks about that by saying, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Certainly, I have revealed the Quran, I have made it easy to remember. We know the Bible, you will not find anyone, and this is not to be arrogant, but you will not find anyone who have memorized the Bible in its entirety, or the Old Testament in its entirety. This is something that's only unique in terms of the Quran. And its uniqueness has not expired. It still lasts up until today. There are those who have memorized the Quran and has preserved the Quran. So when challenges are made to Muslims in terms of how the Quran is being preserved, there are some people who would say that, this is one of the reasons why there's a divide amongst the Sunni and the Shia, because the Shia would accuse the Muslims for changing the Quran in the time of Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And then you have some Islamic phobes who would say that we burnt the original copies and we have to rely on those copies which were in the hands of the Khalif or the Khalifa at that time, which happens to be Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. But we know this is not true. We know that the Quran was compiled, it was revealed in the time of the Prophet ﷺ when he was alive. This is something that we forget. The whole Quran was revealed, or we would not have it. If we say the source comes from the Prophet ﷺ, logic would dictate that it had to be fully revealed in the time or the life of the Prophet ﷺ. It makes no other logical sense to say that parts of it was revealed in the Prophet ﷺ, and then later on other parts were added after the Prophet ﷺ. This would be something that was wide known and wide spread if that occurred in the way that some of these people claim that it has. Nevertheless, the Prophet ﷺ not only instructed the companions to place certain chapters of the Quran in a manner in which we can witness today or observe today, but in the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, was at a time where he was encouraging literate companions to be more active or proactive in terms of compiling the Quran in a book form, or writing. Well, they didn't have books necessarily in the form that we have today, but writing it on skin and rocks and things that did not perish, and the Quran was preserved in that manner. And we know the Battle of Yamama, which is one of the famous stories that we hear from other sources outside of Islamic sources, in terms of maybe 70 Hufad or more were killed in this battle. And this was one of the concerns of the Khalif Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu during the reigns of Abu Bakr. And he came to Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he suggested that, that we get the remaining scribes, or scribes that were at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, like Ubay bin Ka'b, Zayd bin Thabit, and we compile the Quran. We get all the compilations, all the written, I guess you would call forms of preservation. We'll collect all of these things, we'll compile them, and then we would, put it in one format. And this was something that was done in the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and something that was further done in the time of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And as a result, after Umar radiallahu anhu passed, the main compiled book was passed to his daughter Hafsa radiallahu ta'ala anha. And not only that, even before the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, there was books of the Quran that were sent to all the different countries, to Iraq, some was sent to Syria, Medina, and a reciter was sent with them. And one of their methods of making sure that the Quran was consistent with the way it was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ was that they had to bring witnesses. If someone claimed that this was a verse of the Quran, even though the companions were well aware of the Quran, because it was something that was recited amongst the companions in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, even to the extent where one companion was reciting differently than was taught to Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was trying to, resist and attacking this companion with the thinking that he was changing the words of Allah Azza wa Jal. And after Salah, he was addressed and brought to the courts of the Prophet, brought before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him to read and asked Umar to read. And though there was some dialectal differences and dialect, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that both are correct. So we do know that there are 7 or 10 methods of preservation according to different dialects, but there's no changing in the meaning or the word. That's one of the reasons why, if we collect 10 people from all around the world and we ask them all to recite, and amongst these people none of them share the same language, they will all recite the same way. And if one make a mistake amongst these 10 people, all of them would know the mistake that the reciter is making. And this is also show one of the miracles of the preservation of the Quran. Now, how is the Quran relevant to us as individuals? How is it relevant to us in terms of science, in terms of the world, in terms of morale, in terms of ethics? How is it relevant? We do know that the Quran is not a scientific book per se, but it is consistent with science. Quran is more in terms of our salvation and our purpose of life. It encourages amongst the, because we have to understand this world and everything in it is a creation of Allah Azza wa Jal. So in order to, like, for example, in order to interact with the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal, there's a right way of doing it, there's a wrong way of doing it. Sometimes interacting with things, it can have some negative connotations, it can have some positive connotations. For example, Allah Azza wa Jal, just to speak of some of the positive things in which Allah Azza wa Jal has revealed in the Quran. If you look in Surah Al-Qiyamah, the Quran has contributed to a lot in which we utilize, and which we not only utilize, but it's something that is a part of our society today. And one of the things the Quran has mentioned this going back 1400 years ago. In Surah Al-Qiyamah, Allah speaks about the fingerprint. You know, بَلَا قَادِرِينَ عَلَىٰ أَن نُسَوِّيَ بَنَانَا, chapter 75, verse 4. And today we know that you can identify a person by the fingerprint, and every person have a different print on their finger, and not one of these fingerprints are the same. And this is a way that governments use to identify people and to keep a record and keep track of people going in and out of countries and out of things that they would like to secure for whatever reason it may be. But these are one of the methods in which we use today. There's technology that has predicated itself, or its foundation is built upon this understanding of the fingerprint. But how would we have this knowledge? How did we, we didn't just wake up or dream of this knowledge. This is something that Allah Azza wa Jal has revealed through his prophets. And we know that Islam has not only contributed in terms of that, has contributed in terms of how do we understand certain things in terms of astronomy or astrology. I know one of them is less scientific than the other, but I'll mention both of them in terms of understanding the universe, understanding things outside of this world, which is called Earth, this planet, in which is called Earth, in which we live today. And Surah Al-Buruj, it speaks about that. Even in the beginning of Surah Al-Rahman, it speaks about how Allah allows, certain planets, how it swims around its orbit, and how it has a certain consistency to its nature in terms of how it repetitively does the same thing, but it does it in an organized manner. So Allah Azza wa Jal, he speaks about that in Surah Al-Rahman. He speaks about that in Surah Al-Buruj. So the Quran is relevant in terms of how we look at the world. It is very relevant in terms of how we interact with people. It is relevant in terms of how we understand science, because science is actually just knowledge, and knowledge comes from Allah Azza wa Jal. Unfortunately, we live in a time where they have separated science and knowledge. They have made it separate, but it's the same thing. And Allah Azza wa Jal, he tells us in the Quran to seek knowledge. So all of these things is a part of our deen. So the Quran is relevant because when we go to university, we're learning science, or we're engineers, and we're dealing with all these different things in this world. All of this is relevant to the Quran, because the Quran explains to us how we interact with these things, how these things can be a benefit to us, and how to utilize these things. Because a person can manufacture a gun, and they can use the gun to protect themselves from wicked and evil people, or or animals that may that may be a threat to them. Then another group of people can use the same weapon to go kill innocent people, to be an aggressor to mankind. So the same thing with the Quran, the same thing with science. All of these things are linked. So without the Quran as a manual, as a guidance to instruct us how we to engage in this world, how to engage with the things around us, um, the Quran comes to clarify that. Now, some would say that, well, the Bible have already done that. The Old Testament has already done that. As I mentioned before, the Bible and the Old Testament has been changed. This is something that, if we're honest with ourselves, we have to acknowledge it. And to give an example, in the Quran, we believe the Quran, as a result, Allah is Almighty. And to give one example from the Bible, there is a passage in Matthew which mentions about the devil tempting Allah Azza wa Jalla, tempting Jesus, and Jesus is supposed to be 1/3 of the persons of God. But the devil was able to tempt Jesus in that sense, but Jesus declined. We know that Allah Azza wa Jalla is free from that. No creation can tempt the Creator. Uh, so in terms of that, so if our understanding, the Quran has also have a benefit in terms of a shifa, reading it, people who are stressed, people who are suicidal, people who are having different mental illness or psychological damage. The Quran has been a proven fact to help people with these things. And even up until today, as my own personal experience, I see people who are not Muslim and they ask for the Quran just to be recited on them, just to have some mental comfort, or to to relieve themselves of the mental pain or the stress in which they may be going through or experiencing. So it covers all aspects. The Quran covers all aspects. And not only that, there's another important aspect of the Quran is, when reciting it, not only does it helps and benefit us, but we get reward for each letter that's being recited. So Allah is so merciful. Allah loves us so much that not only He gives us a manual to our lives, and a manual for our society. As I mentioned in some past videos before, even morale has to, without having some objective source of morale, then there is no such thing as morals. Morals will be subjective, but because morals cannot be, it cannot be measured with science alone. It cannot be measured with subjective opinion alone. It have to be measured with something objectively, and the Quran gives that objectiveness in terms of our morals. So the Quran comes and it contributes a lot to this. And inshallah, me and Brother Altaf will engage in terms of some of what we have said today, inshallah, going forward.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Altaf. I hope your all of your Ramadan is going good, and especially with last 10 days left. Not last 10 days, subhanAllah, last, I'll say 6 days left, subhanAllah. For Ramadan to end, you are making use of it, use of the days, the nights, the minutes, the hours, in pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and trying to attain maghfirah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With this, inshallah ta'ala, we will start the question. If you guys have any questions, type in the chat, and we'll try to answer that. So one of the things that you mentioned, Sheikh, subhanallah, is there were other books revealed too, and the purpose of the book was for guidance. So were other books revealed for a particular community?
Yes. For example, even the prophet that was sent was only sent for, like Prophet Isa alayhi salam. They were only sent to their people. And so because they were only sent to their people, that the book that was revealed to them was tailored to that community of people. Even though it had some general information in terms of morale, ethics, honesty, for example, not killing, the 10 laws that are in the Old Testament. the Ten Commandments, do not kill, do not, share, a lot of different things, do not cheat. These things were generalized, but however, the book as a whole, in terms of certain laws that was mostly directed to that community or that group of people. The Quran is different in a sense where Allah said, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا كَافَةً لِلنَّاسِ بَشِيرًا وَنَذِيرًا. Allah said that He has sent the Prophet ﷺ to the entirety of mankind, for everyone. And Allah also mentioned that, about the previous prophets, He said, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُم. That we have not sent a messenger except that they spoke the language of that community, that those groups of people who they were sent to. And those messengers, they would come and they would direct in the tongue of those people. So every group of people on the face of the earth, a messenger was sent to them in the tongue of in the tongue of the people.
So you're saying Quran is for whole of the humanity?
All of humanity, yes.
Just humans, jinns?
For the jinns as well. In fact, in Surah Al-Rahman, when Allah speaks, He speaks in dual form, the jinn and man at the same time, throughout the Rahman, and most verses. In Surah Al-Jinn, Allah speaks about the jinn. And even when Allah addresses us in terms of listening to the Quran and remain silent while the Quran, He says, وَإِذَا قُرِيَ الْقُرْآنِ فَاسْتَمِعُوا وَصَرَفْنَا إِلَيْكَ نَفَرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. He speaks about the jinn who are listening to the Quran. Basically, the Qur'an فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا. When the Quran been recited, to remain silent and to adhere and listen to it. But Allah speaks, He addresses these verses to not only mankind, but He also addresses it to jinn as well.
SubhanAllah. So, I mean, very simple question. Can anyone read Quran just like, is it just like another book that can be read?
The Quran can be read by anyone. We do have this misunderstanding, however, in our society that the Quran has to be dictated to us through an imam or scholar. But this is not what the Quran says itself. And, in some verses, unfortunately, we have some people who would misunderstand a verse where it says, if فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ ذِكْرٍ كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, in terms of understanding the Quran, then to refer back to a scholar. And that verse doesn't necessarily mean that. It actually speaking about those people who came to the Prophet ﷺ and they challenged the revelation was given to him. And because previous revelation, the Prophet ﷺ warned them that my message is consistent with with the message of other prophets who were sent to people. So to verify what I'm saying, you should go back and verify what أهل الذكر, to the people who remember the previous revelation that was sent to them. So even that verse is often taken out of context. Allah Azza wa Jal instructs us in the Quran to read the Quran. He also tells us to not only to read the Quran, he tells us to reflect on the Quran. And a lot of times the answers that we're looking for in our lives are in the Quran. And going to someone else, you may not see that which Allah is trying to directly, tell you. There's no medium in our religion. Like, you have other people, other beliefs, they have a medium between them and God. In Islam, we don't have that. Your connection is direct with Allah. Even the Prophet ﷺ is not a medium for us. He's a messenger. We respect him. And he is unable to even change things to make, in the Quran, as Allah speaks in Surah Al-Haqqa, that, that if he, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, would to change, we would cut him from his artery, from his right side. And none of you guys would be able to do anything about it. This is Allah speaking about his own prophet.
Such strong words.
Such strong words. So the Quran in itself, and other verse of Quran, Allah said, Allah تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. Allah won't burden someone else with the actions of another person. Each one of us on an individual basis will be held accountable for what we have done and how we adhere to the commands of Allah Azza wa Jal, because the book is with us. And the Quran is so widespread, and this is one of the reasons why the Prophet ﷺ not only compiled it, he ordered the companions to have it written down, so there'll be no excuse. And today it's still preserved where everyone have access to it. At certain times before that, the event of the compilation, people will have to witness a qari or a reciter reciting the Quran in order to know what Allah wants from them. But today we don't have that problem. We can read the Quran. Now, there may be verses in the Quran that we may not fully understand. There are clear verses and there are ambiguous verses. There's also verses that was revealed within certain contexts. These things have to be studied by scholars and those who have spent time in learning the Quran. But overall, the Quran can be recited by anyone.
Subhanallah. So what I'm understanding is Quran can be read by anyone, subhanallah, but we need to have that intention and that consciousness that this is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the word of the creator, and we should approach it that way.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be just reading it, just flipping the pages.
Yes. You must be conscious that this is the word of Allah Azza wa Jal. But not only that, the Quran says it itself. It says, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ? Why don't you think? أَفَلَا يَتَفَكَّرُونَ? Why don't you think through it? أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ? Why don't you ponder over it? So the Quran is encouraging us to come with that mindset, to open the Quran. This is one of the reasons why Allah said, فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. Before reciting the Quran, say, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Remove everything out of your mind, because shaitan will constantly try to distract you with things of this world. What tests is, whether it's your job, family, it can be other things. So Allah saying, remove these things out of your mind by seeking refuge in me from shaitan and his whispers. And now once you clear your mind, look at the Quran, reflect on the Quran, because there are answers in the Quran for things that you may be going through in your life, or directly or indirectly, or some other person that you have some relationship with may be going through, and it has an indirect effect on you. There's answers in the Quran in terms of that.
Subhanallah. You have mentioned that the signs, the proof that Quran is word of God. I mean, it's a different topic, inshallah. If you could really go deep into it, it will be a topic of itself.
Yes.
So moving forward, inshallah, you have mentioned some of the signs. So alhamdulillah, we believe in Quran. If someone wants to do some research, inshallah, they can do their research. So moving forward, if we believe in Quran, then that we believe in Quran, we believe that word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then how is it applicable to today's life? So one of the biggest problems that we are going through is the relationships in general, like parents and kids, parents and grandfather and grandkids, subhanallah, brothers and brothers, sisters, brothers, subhanallah. I mean, the relationships are breaking. So how is Quran relevant? And this is one of the biggest problems.
In terms of relationships one of the verses of the Quran, Allah speaks about in the Quran about how important to men relationships between families, and even to the extent where in one verse Allah mentions of the negative consequences as a result of us not doing that. So the Quran, first, it gives us our own rights. It explains the rights of a brother over sister over brother, mother over mother and father over children rights over mothers and parents. And Surah Al-Luqman, it goes into that in certain aspects of the respect that we must give our mothers. Allah speaks about the mother particularly. He said, wahnan ala wahnan. It's like she had you and went through that experience of having you over that time. وهنا على وهن وفصاله في عامين يشكر لي ولوالديك. And Allah said the right of that baby has over the mother is that she must breastfeed that baby for 2 years. That's mentioned in Surah Al-Luqman. But the rights that then after that, Allah speaks about once the child begins to become more developed and he start to reach the states, just even before he reached the stages of adolescence. But at these stages where he's mature enough to understand right from wrong, Allah then speaks about the rights that the parents have over the children, that you must respect them. You must take care of them in old age, young age. Allah says that I've made them protectors over you. I've made them, authority over you as children. And today we're starting to see that a lot of children are moving away from that in terms of respect for the parents, because we feel that we have everything at our fingertips. And we live in this generation where a lot of children are very spoiled. But the Quran, the test for parents, the test for the parents and test for the children are different. For an example, when you're a baby, your parents, they didn't complain. They took care of you in the best way they could, even though you made a vomit on them 20 times. That changed the diapers, and that's the test that the child goes through, whether or not the mother takes care of them and they provide for them. But the test the parents go through when they become old, they become a baby again, and the
Sure.
children become almost in a sense where they able to do more. They're more energetic. They have their health is in a better state. So that's the test for the parents, when the parents become now humble in certain aspects. So Allah has created balance. It's very consistent. It's very consistent because if if the child shows the respect and the parents give the child the rights that Allah Azza wa Jal has ordered for the parents to give the child or the children. And at a different stage and part of life, now the children begin to give the rights to the parents as Allah has ordered them. So it goes in harmony with nature. It doesn't contradict nature. Today, what we see today is we have subjective laws in terms of how children should treat their parents based upon studies and data and opinions. And these are men who already make mistakes and they trying to determine what is good for the child and what is good for the parents. And as a result, we can see statistically, we live in one of the best countries, America, but in the court system, you will hear that a lot of one of the biggest complaints is the rights of the children in terms of relationship with the mother or the father. And even in the court system today, we see that this is a major problem. And who should have what rights and what rights should be given to who. But the Quran has already laid this out in a way that is harmony with nature and is very consistent. Even in terms of marriage, in terms of relationships, Allah has mentioned the rights of a woman and also the rights of a man. In terms of for example, the money, Allah has mentioned, like some men actually have issues with certain verses in the Quran, in terms when Allah speaks about men receiving more money than a woman, and then in certain verses, I can't recall the verse.
Inheritance.
In terms of inheritance and things of that nature. But the solution for that is Allah has already made the man, responsible for the needs of women, for the needs of his spouse. So actually, he's getting less if you do the math. But whatever money she gets, it's completely hers. Why is it that way? For example, she may be a caretaker of the children, whether a battle, war, or something take place, maybe he dies. There's still some support system that she has to start with before that happens. So there's all these little details, nuances that sometimes in our society that we're fighting for. The Quran has already given solutions for that. And the solutions are very relevant, because if you look at certain relationships today that adhere to the legal systems in terms of relationship in the Quran, you find that they're more they're more happy, they're more I would say more relaxed, and they're much more successful than cases where you don't see that system in
So
place.
a lot of people, I think a lot of people know that this is in Quran. What is stopping us from accepting it and implementing in our life? If you have to say it in few sentences, what would you say?
One of the biggest thing I think is our own desires. There's a lot of distractions and there's a lot of desires. Unfortunately, there's Shaitan has he has distracted us to the extent we're no longer looking at things logically, but we're looking at it to a scope of our own desires. And I think that's one of the main reasons. And we're not willing to sacrifice. We're not willing to look at the bigger picture. And once a person understands their purpose, then they will understand how these verses are relevant to them. It goes with knowing one's purpose too.
If the viewers have any questions, inshallah, please type in. We will try to answer those questions. One of the things that you mentioned, Sheikh, during your talk about Quran being a shifa, and as we know in today's world, with so much comfort, with so much accessibility to things, and just able to achieve so much. Humans are depressed, anxious,
Yes.
stressed. I mean, anywhere in the world, pretty much anywhere in the world,
Everywhere.
and
Yes.
especially here in US,
Yes.
we have so many cases of depression. We have so many cases of anxiety. We have so many cases of PTSD, stress, and all this.
Yes.
Subhanallah.
Someone
So,
just recently sent me a video. I believe it was in Egypt. Guy, he was people respected him because he was a very prominent, or I mean, he was expected to be. I mean, he was looked at as something very promising in terms of education and the things that he had. And then one night, no one understood. He went and he just jumped off a cliff and committed suicide in front of everybody. Everybody gathered and he just jumped. And some of the people were giving some commentary as to how he was and the things he would say. Even though at his disposal, we live in an era, it wasn't that, that he couldn't get medication, it wasn't money, it wasn't because of job. But the thing is, the lack of knowing your purpose is lack of being connected to the creator, that lack of connection, that spiritual connection, which is the strength. It's nothing. It's internally you're empty, even though you have all these external things. And data have shown that a lot of people who committed suicide, a lot of people who's overstressed, and the Quran comes with a solution in terms of that. One of the solution, the Quran says itself, وَنَنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, right? It comes as a shifa and a mercy to mankind. So the Quran, once a person is in line in terms of their purpose, they're aligned with the Creator, then these things that affect people psychologically, doesn't have the effect that it will have on a person who's internally empty. Because the thing is, like, you can make as much money as you want. You can drive the car. After a while, you get tired of that. After money, you get tired of spending. You can only travel but so much. You can only but do so much with the things that you have. And then what's next? So the thing is, that you're going to die. And when you're going to die, it doesn't matter everything that you may have accumulated in this world. Up to the point when you die, you realize, okay, I have all these things, but I'm starting to get old. I'm getting older and older every day. What am I really doing? You begin questioning yourself. And that goes into your purpose. And the Quran gives the solution for that. The Quran speaks about that, that your soul will separate. Your soul is the living thing that has no time span on it, but the body, everything else that comforts the body, that, helps and nourish the body, that will remain here with the body. So when the Quran speaks about the soul and speaks about the body, it gives, it highlights the solutions in terms of that.
SubhanAllah. I mean, I'll get to that question, inshallah ta'ala, maybe towards the end. I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
But we have a question from one of our viewer, listener. The question is, first, salam. We see great division between different sects of Islam to the point where they consider each other different. What does Quran warns us about this? Having different sects.
For example, the Prophet ﷺ, just to mention, he said that one of the signs of Day of Qiyamah, there will be 73 sects. And he said that 72 of them will be in the fire of Jahannam. Only one will enter into to Jannah. Now, a verse of the Quran, this is something, before we speak about the sects of Islam, let's go a little bit further back. These are some of the things that happened amongst the Jews and the Christians. For example, if Musa والسلام, was alive today, he wouldn't know what a Jew was. Never heard of it. If Prophet Isa والسلام, was alive today, he wouldn't know what a Christian was. Never heard of it. Prophet Ibrahim والسلام, was a Muslim. So Allah said, ما كان إبراهيم يهوديا ولا نصرانيا ولكن كان حنيفا مسلما. He was not a Christian. Prophet Ibrahim was not a Christian. He was not a Jew, but yet he was one who submitted to God as a Muslim. And we know that's linguistic. Sometimes we get caught up in terminology. And as a result of that, we start breaking off in different sects because of these different terminologies. Even myself, just to use myself an example, I wouldn't say I'm a Sunni Muslim, I'm a Shia Muslim, I'm just a Muslim. The thing is, if I'm following the Sunnah, why do I need to say I'm a Sunni Muslim? Why? The Sunnah is in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And people say, oh, I say that so I can distinguish myself from them. But the thing is, the Prophet ﷺ distinguished himself from them in his character and his actions, not by titles or labels. Never did he ever do that. That's not even part of the Sunnah in itself. And then Allah speaks in the Quran. He says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hold on to the rope of Allah. Hold on to the Quran. Let the Quran be that means in which you unify with. وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, and don't disunite. So it's been ordered in the Quran for us not to disunite. So if someone does something, they're going against the direct order of Allah Azza wa Jal. So some will say that, you know what, I'm this, or I'm that. I don't want to give any names for the sake of argument. I could, but I don't want to do that, because one will say, why you mentioned this and I'm part of this, opposed to that. So if someone amongst their own respective groups or sects, and they claim to be this above the other, the measuring stick of knowing what is factually correct and based on truth should be the Quran. It should be the Quran. Even hadith is subjective in that way. So if the hadith is subjective in that understanding, then we should come back to the foundation of it all, which is the Quran. So, okay, let's agree the Quran says this. We both agree. Okay, now let's go to step 2, step 3. But unfortunately, we have people who take different snips or parts of history and different groups, because even amongst the companions, we know that some of them had their disagreements. And amongst some of them, they fought amongst each other in terms of these disagreements and in terms of understanding and doing things. But one of the things that you will find that, and this I like to speak on more things that we have in common, opposed to more things that we have that are not in common. And we know that the Shia, the Sunni, whatever groups, we all can unite on the Quran. We can end this today. One of the things that is killing the Muslims today and is hurting us, it's not that we're not protesting enough. It's not that we're not taking any political position. It's not that we don't have enough money. It's not that we're not contributing to technology. The problem was killing us today, and this is something Allah warned us about it. And the solution came from Allah. Allah warned us about what will happen, and then He warned us about what the only solution that would end this is unity. Once we began to see Muslim as a Muslim, outside of culture, outside of race, outside of background, outside of country, once we began to, when our Muslim brother is sick, it doesn't matter who he is, a stranger, and we become sick when he's sick. And once he become worried, we become worried. And when he become hurt, we become hurt. Then there will never be any change in this amongst the Muslims. Never will there be change until we feel what they feel. And this is something the Prophet ﷺ told: when the body is hurt, a Muslim, when one body is hurt, then the whole ummah is hurt. And when one body feels good, then the entire ummah feels good. For example, subhanAllah, this unity is causing more friction than it is causing good. It's causing more harm than it is good. And as a result of that, Muslims have been killed. As we look in Burma, we look in China. Just imagine if Muslim was detached. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in Hadith, he said one of the signs of the day of Qiyamah, one of the things that towards the end times that would be our destruction. He said that, the companions asked, he said that it will be so many Muslims will be like the fog on the sea. The Hadith says, be like the fog on the sea. But the companions said, wow, subhanAllah, well, no one will be able to overtake them, because the companions, they were always used to them being less in number. There was always 300 people combating 10,000 or 1,000 people. That's how they fought. So that made them happy to see, wow, Muslims would be like the fog in the ocean. But the Prophet said, yes, they said, but they would be very weak. They would be overtaken. And so they were shocked. What do you mean overtaken? And he said, well, the reason to be overtaken is the love of this world. And sometimes we're in love with our minds. And we like to say, oh, I know this. No one, even a scholar, can know every subject and field. And as a result of that, he starts his own sect. Then he starts his own sect. And then he can never be wrong. He can't go against public opinion or or any facts. And the Prophet ﷺ said that a wise person is a person, he said a wise leader, wise person is a person who listens to the awam, who listen to the public when they make a concern in terms of correction or something that's unfactual, and to be able to take that and add that to their knowledge. He mentioned that's the leader that we, that we should seek our knowledge from. So I think a lot of it. I'm sorry, this drawn out
I think very
discussion.
good, mashallah.
But yeah, but subhanallah, yeah. So I think the only way to come out of that is that wa'tasimu bihablillahi jami'an, to hold on to the rope of the Quran. The Quran should be the unified factor in this, especially in this time and age, because we do know that there are some things that are being changed. Even our Islamic history has been changed right before our very eyes by those who are not even Muslim. I mean, and we can see that, like, we're told one thing and other things are being changed right before our very eyes. But one thing they can't change is the Quran.
Very true.
They can't change the Quran. So even if they burn every last Quran today, we still have Qurans. So that's the only thing that's the core thing that we have to unify on. And I think, inshallah, if we unify on that and we come out of this asabiyya, this tribalism, this culturalism, this I'm from this country, I'm from that country, and we unite truly on La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, that there's no God, and we rely on that objective morale, the objective source of authority, which is Allah Azza wa Jal, then we shouldn't have any problems.
Inshallah. Hope you're satisfied with the answer. Inshallah, if you have follow-up question, please do ask. So in the gist, what I'm understanding, Sheikh, is that we need to return back to Quran as a teacher. Subhanallah.
Yes.
Of course, not denying the fact that Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a guiding factor too. But in terms of Quran is the primary source.
Yes. And the thing is, and once we do that with the Quran, there's one very important thing that we will get out of that. We will understand, we'll be able to look at all these different sects that are being created, and we'll be able to take out the good and the bad. You won't need the labels, but you will have you'll have the spectacles which to see the good in it and be able to take the bad out of it. But because we don't have the Quran, we're not holding onto the Quran, is we make takfir on other groups, and then we say we're the best ones.
Wow.
Yeah, subhanallah, like, can you imagine it? And then we expect the mercy of Allah to befall on us, or our condition to change. And Allah said, "Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim." Certainly, Allah does not change the condition of the people until they change that condition within themselves.
Subhanallah, subhanallah. May Allah make it easy. May Allah unite the whole ummah. Inshallah ta'ala. So Sheikh, I mean, I'm interested, at least. If anyone else have a question, please do type in. Inshallah, we'll try to answer that. My question was about Quran being a shifa.
Yeah.
Subhanallah. So, what and how can it be shifa? How can we make it, for spiritual purposes? Because our spirit also needs some healing. Our physical body also need healing. And Quran, you said, is shifa for both
yeah.
Physical and spiritual.
Spiritual, yes. And you speak in more terms of spiritual, right?
My question is, yes, if you can, I think you talked about a little bit about physical, where it eases your stress because what you think and all that. And in terms of spiritual, how does it help? And how does our spirituality needs to be strong? Like, does our spirit needs to be strong?
Well, it enhances your spirituality in itself. The Quran in itself, it enhances your spirituality. If you're on a low level, it enhances in terms of your commitment. It gives you the dedication. It allows you to see things in a way in which it allows you to see things in a way which is normal, which is conducive, and it gives you the clear vision, for example, to be able to react in terms of, for example, a person may have an encounter or a disagreement in a relationship between him and his wife, and generally the anger part of him would get the best of him and he react. But understanding the Quran and understanding how Allah Azza wa Jal has created both, and also having that inside, having that connection with Allah through the Quran, then you don't look at it through the eyes that you don't react through the eyes of your desires, but you tend to act and respond to it in a way through the connection that Allah Azza wa Jal has given you through Him, and responding to them. and as a result of that, you're being rewarded for that. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He will reward you for that, but it has an effect in many different cases similar to that. It boosts a person's concern and their morale about things because it puts things in their proper perspective. I don't know if I'm answering the questions. If I'm not, then you be more specific to give me a better understanding. Yes.
I think you're answering it. Subhanallah, we have just 5 minutes left. So my question would be, how can we understand Quran and find solutions for our problems, like everyday problems? Because Quran is in Arabic. Most of us do not speak Arabic.
Yes.
And what can we do to really start our journey of learning Quran and benefiting from it?
Well, one of the good things is you have a lot of English translation for someone who's at a beginner stage of trying to get more involved with the Quran. But the Quran, as Allah says, that we're supposed to seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave, meaning from birth up until old age to our last breath. So the Quran is something that it's an ongoing struggle in terms of learning it. Even for a person who speaks Arabic and Arabic is who speaks Arabic and Arabic is their language. They speak Arabiya. Even for that person, it's still a struggle, even with knowing the language in terms, because it's something to be learned every day. And the more we ponder on a verse, that's why I say ponder over verses. Sometimes you have to read a verse 20, 30, 40 times just to get that first understanding of that verse. You may get one understanding, then you read it again, you get a better understanding. And as you get older with experience or more things that you go through in life, it further your understanding in terms of the Quran. But that's one part. The other part of the question you asked was, I forgot.
Okay, I'll follow up with a question. So you mentioned that the translation of Qurans are available, which is very true, alhamdulillah.
Yes.
Is there any specific book, at least from your perspective, you would suggest to our listeners so that they can start their journey from that book, inshallah? And there might be books.
I don't remember authors, but I do know they have Qurans out called word-to-word Qurans. Learning basic words, and even before a person did to learn Sarf and Nahu, like the grammar of the Arabic classical grammar, because we have to understand something. Not everyone would fully understand the Arabic grammar or understand the language, especially if they're much older in age. So these are and if we're unable to do that in terms of our own selves, it should at least be something that should be implemented and encouraged for our youth and our children to be more involved with, because we have the opportunity. We'll be asked by Allah if you had the opportunity and you didn't use the opportunity. So we'll all be asked in terms of that. But in terms of learning the Quran, start with a small surah. One companion's he used to love Surah Al-Ikhlas. Qul huwa Allahu ahad. He used to recite every salah to the extent the companions would complain about it. And he understood the Quran, but that was the most profound, beautiful, or loved surah to him, that he continuously used to recite that surah. And the Prophet smiled so much and said, let him, because if that's like 1/3 of the entire Quran, or I believe the exact statement of the Prophet. But anyways, he said there's a lot of reward in that surah, and for him, Allah loves him as he loves the Kalam Allah. So the thing is, the thing is opening up that door. The main thing is opening up that door. Start with a small surah. Begin learning the words and the meaning of that small surah. So, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar. Qul huwa Allahu ahad. Yes, and even if you don't go to the next surah, spend 1 month on just reflecting on the meaning of that surah. When you read in salah, and you read it in surah, don't read surah. And often we do this when we're making our salah, reciting. Don't just read it just for the sound or read it just for the rhythm, but let your mind begin traveling through the words of that surah, and start reflecting on that surah. And then not only reflect on the surah, think to yourself, how does this surah relates to myself? Like, what type of personal connection? Okay, even if a surah is revealed at a certain time, for whatever context, put yourself in those shoes and say, okay, Now this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm doing. How does this sort of relates to me? And subhanallah, personally, I've seen great benefit in that.
Subhanallah.
Uh,
Sheikh, sorry to put you on the spot. I don't think I've talked to you before this, but it just came to my mind. So this is the question. Subhanallah. So most of the listeners on the live broadcast are Knowai community members.
mashallah.
Should we, or can we plan something for the community on a regular basis where we are learning together,
Yes,
not as a teacher and student learning, but as a brothers
Yes,
learning the word of
yes,
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
yes, definitely. Being in a halaqah structure.
Structure, yes.
Yes, no, yes, definitely,
Subhanallah.
definitely. Inshallah.
Inshallah. So maybe we can talk more about it, and inshallah ta'ala,
Yes, inshallah.
do something about it.
I'm
May Allah
game for
subhanahu
that.
wa ta'ala.
Yeah, I'm game for
Inshallah.
that. Inshallah.
So just to wrap it up, Sheikh, we have like almost it's 3 o'clock. Just to wrap it up, the main intention of our topic today was to see how Quran reached us and how it compared with other books and how it is relevant. And we just touched few topics that are relevant.
Yes.
Subhanallah. And once you start learning, when you start reading Quran, I feel we'll find so many solutions to our problems in
Yes.
Quran. I myself, whenever I'm in difficulty and open a Quran, subhanallah, I think we kind of talked about
Yes.
it before too.
Yes.
Subhanallah, you land about like exactly at the surah and talks about your problem. I'm like, wow, subhanallah.
That happened to me so many times, subhanAllah. I remember one time I was very stressed. I was going through something that was really bothering me. So I said, you know what, just go to the masjid. I dropped everything I was doing. I went to the masjid. And it so happened I didn't open up the Quran, but the Imam was reciting Surah Al-Maghrib.
So,
And each verse was like Allah. He started with what I was going through. And then he was giving solution after solution after solution. I just broke down in tears because it was so, I was like, subhanAllah. It's like I went there just to get the solution.
subhanallah.
And I had many different experiences like this, subhanAllah. I mean, just thinking about it, I can still feel that feeling. So the Quran has it. I remember a man, he's actually on YouTube and he speaks about it. He was saying that he wanted to take Shahada and the people kept trying to give him, encouragement, take it now. He said, oh, I'm not ready yet. And he said, I'm waiting on God will send me a sign. So he said, when God sent me a sign, I'm going to do it. And he kept looking. And he said, people kept coming through the door. So, okay, this is going to be a sign. Or he was looking for a sign because he prayed, if you're true, if this is the right religion, give me a sign. He did everything. He was looking for signs. I mean, different things were happening, but none of them were signs that he was expecting or looking for according to what he prayed for. And so I guess as he was sitting, he opened up the Quran and it started talking to him directly. And he said, and I forget the verses he was mentioning, but it was speaking in terms that, this is a sign for those who are looking and reflecting, and then it go in and on and on. And he said, wow, subhanAllah, it was right there in front of him the entire time. So, Allah Azza wa Jal has used this book to guide many people. As we know, it still remains a guidance for us. All we have to do is pick up this book and put the Harry Potter book on the shelf and spend a little extra time in the Quran, and we'll see, subhanAllah, we'll see
wonders of the world.
We'll see a life-changing, we'll have a life-changing experience. May Allah Azza wa Jal, grant us tawfiq and forgive us for our shortcomings. May Allah Azza wa Jal, I know this may be the last recording of Ramadan, a part of this series. May Allah accept our Ramadan. And may Allah give us the understanding of the Quran and allow the Quran to have an impact upon our lives and an impact upon all those who adhere to this book. And may it be a guidance for those who are confused. And may it be a guidance for those who are looking for solutions. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma arhamna bil Quran al-Azim rabi'a qulubina wa nura sudurina. وجلاء حزاننا وذهاب همومنا وغمومنا وسائقنا ودليلنا إلى جناتك جنات النعيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد بفضل سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Couple of quick announcements, inshallah. So this is our last session for Ramadan, but inshallah ta'ala will be coming up with more programs, and inshallah our Shaykh is here, alhamdulillah. We will benefit more from him. And if you have any suggestions, inshallah ta'ala, please do let us know. Inshallah, we'll try to start something. And one last thing, with Eid coming inshallah ta'ala soon,
our masjid is planning to do something, and we'll be sending out a link where you can suggest your ideas on how we can celebrate the Eid with social distancing, keeping social distancing in mind. Maybe something like a drive-through or something. So the link will give you the opportunity to give your idea, and inshallah ta'ala, if the idea is approved by the board, inshallah ta'ala, after meeting the social distancing requirements, then the person will be getting inshallah ta'ala $50 gift card. So please look out for it. Inshallah, it will be coming in a couple of hours. The link will be sent out in a couple of hours. So hopefully we'll see you again in few weeks. Assalamu alaikum.